G'day and welcome to another Space Engineers tutorial. Today we're looking at a few tips and tricks that I've figured out through making a lot of mistakes on how you can make your workshop blueprints look a lot nicer. And this applies to any mods, any scripts, or anything you upload to the workshop, as none of these techniques are unique to blueprints. To create a blueprint that you publish on the workshop, it's actually incredibly easy. All you have to do is press Ctrl B on your build. It'll then show up in this list, you select it, and then you can publish it to the workshop. So if we have a look at our blueprint we just created, it's this one. We just click Details and Publish to Workshop. We're not going to publish this just yet though. One of the important things to do when you're about to publish a blueprint to the workshop is make sure you've named your grid. You can rename your blueprint once you've published it, but if you're going to edit this blueprint later, it can be more convenient to have the same name on the workshop as you do in the game and in your blueprint list. It just makes editing that little bit simpler. If you've got a vanilla build, it can be valuable to highlight that it is vanilla in the name. You don't have to do this, and I often don't do this. I will often just make sure that I tag somewhere that it's vanilla in the description, but that is certainly an option. One thing I definitely would say though is make sure that your name has some useful information in it about what the grid is or what it does. Don't just give it the name of some obscure god or creature or something like that and expect people to know what it does or to find it later when they're searching for some cool grid. If you're publishing something to the workshop, I'm assuming you're wanting other people to see it and to enjoy it, so make sure you can help them find it a little bit. Speaking of finding something, that screenshot that I got before, have a look at it. If we click on details, we can have that hold up and I can move my mouse pointer. We've got a green grid on a green background. It's not a very interesting screenshot. It's not got any details about what the thing is, other than the fact that you can kind of see a turret and you can kind of see a solar panel. So, how are we going to improve that before we publish it to the workshop? Well, the first thing in this case is let's move this to a place where it isn't camouflaged against the background. We're wanting this to stand out. We're not wanting it to be hidden in our main thumbnail. So let's jump into Spectator Cam and we'll jump over to some snow. You can see how much better this looks than our previous thumbnail. And if we bring it up in the blueprints list for comparison, you can see that it looks a bit dull. Whereas this shot looks more dynamic. The turret is taking pride of place in the shot, and we've excluded unnecessary parts of it to try and make this more interesting and try to grab people's attention. So let's take a screenshot here, and then I'm going to show you how we can use this screenshot as our main thumbnail for our blueprint. Once I have my screenshot, I like to load it up in an image editor, and that's where I add things like our name. And to me, it's important that the name on the thumbnail is clear and easy to read. Use a font that, when reduced to thumbnail size, allows it to be relatively easily read. So even at this tiny size, I can clearly see what that says and I get an idea of what the vehicle is. The other thing I like to add is something to identify that it was me that did it. And I like this little spaceman next to my fonts on my thumbnails. So that's my simple thumbnail. One of the things that's important when creating your own thumbnails is to ensure that the image size is small enough that Steam won't reject your image size. So you want to make sure that the final image is less than 2 megabytes in size. So I usually just drop down to a 1280 by 720 pixel size. You can use square dimensions for workshop images. I tend to work in 16 by 9 almost all the time, so I'm just used to working in that format, so I stick with it, but you do not have to. And then we'll save this as a PNG, and I'm going to call it thumb.png because then we're going to be able to place it directly in the thumbnail folder. Where you want to save this thumbnail eventually is going to be the folder for the blueprint, or the mod, or the script, or whatever it is, and you find that folder by going to app data %/space engineers. And if we want to go straight to the blueprints folder, we can type blueprints. In our blueprints folder, we'll have local and workshop. You want to go into local then go into your particular blueprint. And for us, that is sandbag. And it'll be this one. And then in this folder, you can see that we've got these 3 files, and we're going to replace this thumb.png with our own one. Replace file in destination. Yes. And you can see now, this is the thumbnail we're going to load up with. So if we go back to Space Engineers, we can then hit F10, sandbag. And even though right now it is showing that original thumbnail, that's just because I haven't reloaded the game. If we go to details and we go to publish, it'll publish with our new thumbnail. We've now got our sandbag on the workshop. I changed the visibility to hidden when I first start publishing something so that I can fiddle with it and make it perfect before I make it visible for everybody. The first thing I always do is I go and put a bit of a description in. So I've written a brief description of the sandbag, what it is, some additional features it has, the recommended use for it. You can come up with your own headings and things. I've just come up with this quickly as a bit of an example. Hit save, and then when we go back to our item, at least we'll have a bit of a description as well. But this text isn't all that exciting, and there are a number of things you can do to make it a bit more interesting. If we want to add things like headers, we can do that. There's a bunch of different commands which I think are similar to BB code. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one, it's not really important. The important thing is you can do things like this, h1/h1, and that will make the sandbag bit show up in blue text like so. And we can also make dot points, we can make bolds, and we can turn this into this. You can see how this is going to be a bit easier to read, it's going to be a bit more interesting to look at. I don't tend to do a lot of this, and I should really do more of it to make my descriptions a bit easier to read and a bit more pleasing on the eye. Now, we've got one screenshot. Doesn't really tell the whole story though, does it? So, let's go back to Space Engineers and let's get some more screenshots. Let's try and get something interesting. First off, let's bring it back to daytime. If we've got a turret on our ship and we want to show it with it firing in the screenshot, we simply go into the control panel, turn off idle movement, turn on shoot, and turn the turret back on. If we have a particular angle we want it to be shooting from, we just need to turn the turret on, grab control of it, and align it in the position where it's going to be most interesting. If you're wondering what position you're in, you can press F8, get yourself in a decent position with the spectator cam of where you think the turret's going to be viewed from, then press F9 and you can move the turret to the exact position you want, so that it's nicely placed against the background, not hidden against a tree, not shooting off in the wrong direction, basically so that it looks interesting. Obviously you don't want to take the screenshot from this position since we've got our turret overlay, but it will get the turret into the position you want. So let's go back to F6, let's get out of turret control, then we will turn shoot on. And that's just going to keep on shooting. Now we can get ourselves a screenshot with the turret firing. If you've got an NVIDIA graphics card, this is a great opportunity to use Ansel by pressing Alt F2 and keep pressing it until you actually get a turret flame, and then you can move in and get whatever angle you want. For the best results with using Ansel, I would always load up in an offline world. That way you get complete control over the shot because the world gets paused when you press Alt F2. That way you can move around and everything is still. If you're in any sort of online mode, it won't do that, and so you won't really be able to take full advantage of the tool. The controls in Ansel can be a little bit weird, especially when you're doing rolls, because as soon as you roll a little bit and then use the mouse again to move the viewpoint, it resets to whatever the position your camera was in as a horizontal when you jumped in. So if I hop out of here and turn my jetpack on and turn like this, when I press Alt F2, this is now counted as the horizontal. It's a useful thing to keep in mind if you're having trouble getting a shot, is to hop back to your previous position, turn yourself to a more useful horizontal, and then press Alt F2 again. And now it's a lot easier to move around and get the angle that we're after. If you don't have Ansel, you can still just spam F12 and hope that one of them gets you with the turret flame in shot. One of the things I like about using Ansel is that I can play with my field of view live. So I can change from something that looks like it's taken with a fisheye lens, which gets a lot of distortion towards the edges of frame, right down to something that's an ultra telephoto lens, or a reasonable telephoto lens anyway. And it does create a different appearance in the shot. It's good to mix this up and to change it around. And if you don't have an NVIDIA card, you can still do this. It takes a little bit more work, but it is still possible. So let's try and get a decent screenshot for this now. And if you're struggling on where to place things on frame, the rule of thirds can help you come up with a decent shot. So points of interest should be on these lines. And this is the main point of interest, so I've put it at the intersection of the two of them. And you can see that looks more interesting than that, having a dead center. Think about your framing and you'll find that your screenshots are something you're much happier with. So snap, we'll take that. And now I'll show you how you can do this if you've got an AMD card. So instead of going through Ansel, we can go to Options, Graphics, and we can drop our field of view right down. So let's drop it down to 40. Can't go quite as low as we did before, but still low enough to get rid of most of the edge distortion that you get. And now we can pick a viewpoint. Let's try something different. Let's try getting it framed like that. And then we just hit F12 a few times and hope that one of them gets the flames in shot like we're wanting. When I'm coming up with different screenshots of a particular build, I try and give angles that demonstrate exactly what the thing is, as well as interesting ones. So this one from above is one I would always include for the sandbag, since it shows exactly what it is in reasonable clarity. For other builds, I'd also include a profile shot like this, so that you can see it side on. It's important to remember though, for each of these screenshots, think about what's behind the grid. Right now, I've got this against the trees in the background, which isn't great. This slightly elevated profile point of view doesn't lose any information, but it does make it clearer because we're now just silhouetted against the snow. And if I move over to here and move out a little bit further, there we go. We can see a bit more. Now that we've got all these images, we need to go back and find them all. Whenever I'm creating a workshop item, I tend to create a folder where I keep all my screenshots for it. And we've got our 3 screenshots. We've got this one, and this one. And you can see how much more dynamic this looks with the canted angle, with the firing and everything like that. It makes for a much more interesting screenshot even than this one. So we could replace the original one with that, but for now we're just going to stick with uploading these 3 to the workshop. If you're going to be modifying something for a while, I would strongly recommend loading up in your usual browser, the Steam Workshop, instead of going through the Steam client or through the Steam overlay. You'll find yourself getting a lot less frustrated. You can simply click on add/edit images and videos, upload your images, or attach a YouTube video URL. If you want to use an image that is larger than 2 meg, you cannot upload it through this method. But you can upload it to a site like Imgur and post it in the description. And I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. If we go to choose files, let's just upload these ones for the moment. And it says that it's too large. So we need to shrink it down. We're going to have to shrink that down to where the file gets below 2 meg. And a way to be fairly confident that your image will fall under that 2 meg limit is to drop it down to 1280 by 720. So now that we've done that, click upload, wait for the Australian internet to catch up, and then we'll upload each one as we go. And there we go, we've got our 3 images. Now to control the order that they appear, we can just slide them across and move them around wherever we want, however we want them to show up. I actually uploaded them in the order that I wanted them to show up, so we'll stay with that. Click save and continue, and now you'll get this showing up. It's important to remember that the first image in that list is the image that will actually show up big. The thumbnail is this one over here. And this is why I wanted this big dynamic image to be the first one that shows up, because it's going to be the one people see as soon as they click on the link, and it's a much more interesting picture than this. These show some useful information about the build, but this is interesting and fun to look at, so that's why I wanted it to show up. Now, if we want to show a large image or a GIF of our build, we can do that. This tutorial isn't really the place for me to go through how to record videos, edit them, and upload them, and create GIFs out of them, that sort of thing. So all I'm going to do is show you how you can include an image in your description that is too large to fit in the title images that show up the top. And that's because of the 2 meg limit, but sites like Imgur don't have that. So all we've got to do is type square brackets img, close square brackets, put our direct GIF link, type square brackets /img square brackets. Easy as that. Click save, go back to our item, and ta-da! We now have our pan showing up in our description. And this file is about 7 megs in size, so it's a lot bigger than Steam would allow me, but we just have this keeping on running past and showing people a more interesting view of the sandbag. I could have definitely come up with a better video to show, but this is just a demonstration of what you can do and how you can make your descriptions a bit more interesting and your workshop items a bit more dynamic and something that people will actually be interested in looking at. And now let's have a look at a couple of examples of workshop items by people who really have this stuff nailed. People like Meridius9 or Lucas, depending on where you've come across him. His stuff is right on point, very clear writing in the thumbnails, very clear descriptions, all there, everything you need and nothing you don't. My use of the GIF in the description was pretty frivolous, but this example from Ardav's fleet command is a little more useful as it's actually showing you what's going on and creating a bit more interest in it, using it across multiple points in the description. It's important to break up things like this because it'd be very easy for something with this much detail to turn into a giant wall of text. If you've got any ideas of your own about how to make workshop items look better or be more useful or more interesting, let me know in the comments. And as always, there's plenty more to come, so I'll see you then.